Good evening to everyone that's joining. We'll wait just a couple more minutes for more attendees and then we'll go ahead and get started. All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started this evening. Before we introduce tonight's speaker, I'll just announce the seminar for next month, which is going to be on Tuesday, May 20th. This will be a special seminar as it's going to be held in person at the Cornell Equine Park and will also occur simultaneously on Zoom if you can't be there in person. Our topic will actually focus on the Cornell Equine Park, mainly on discovery care and then breeding for excellence. We're going to be sending out the registration link for that event with the recording of tonight's session, so you can expect to see that in your inbox early next week. And I will go ahead and introduce this evening's speaker. Regulars here will already be very familiar with tonight's speaker, Dr. Lindsay Goodale. She's been involved with the Equine Seminar Series since its inception in 2018. Dr. Goodale is a graduate of the Cornell College of Veterinary Medicine, and she is currently a senior lecturer in the Department of Animal Science in the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences. There, she teaches both graduate and undergraduate student courses in equine biology, behavior, and animal welfare. Dr. Goodale also serves as the equine extension specialist for New York State, and she is currently, as if she doesn't have enough on her plate, currently pursuing board certification through the American College of Animal Welfare. She also has an off-the-track thoroughbred who enjoys clicker training, so that's fun. Tonight's topic for Dr. Goodale will be the Horse Farm Improvement Program, and I will turn it over to Lindsay.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nickelbein. I appreciate it. And hello to everyone. If you've attended before, you might recognize me. I'm often here, but not often speaking. So I'm glad to get to talk to you guys this evening and hopefully answer some of your questions and go over a fun new program. Before that, I figured I would have the visual version of the About Me slide. So I do have a couple dogs that I just have to mention. They're little terrier mixes, whatever they are, Annabelle and Cricket. And then I've been a horse person for quite a long time. And I've only owned off-track dark bay thoroughbreds. We all have a type, I guess, right? This is a picture of me in vet school and an externship in Chile. And then this is a picture. I wanted to bring up the fact that we have had in-person events for this equine seminar series in the past. We had a Cornell Equine Hospital tour. And this was, if you've ever been there, you might have seen the treadmill that we have. And this was Linus on the treadmill and me chatting with the technician there. So we're excited to have another event on campus next month. And for those of you who can attend, we'll see you in a month. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about how we started the Horse Farm Improvement Program and what it is and why. So the background for this program is essentially that we didn't have, when I was thinking of starting this and talking to my colleagues, we didn't have in the state any kind of program for equine farm certification, evaluation, improvement. We did have, back in 2002, there was a program called the New York State Horse Health Assurance Program, or NYCHAP. And if you work with cattle at all, you might have heard of NYCHAP, the cattle version of that program. But they lost funding in 2011, and since then there hasn't really been anything in that vein. And as the name implies, that was mostly focused on horse health and some biosecurity stuff as well. So we wanted to not only bring back some kind of resource to address this kind of lack of a official program in the state, but also hopefully broaden it to be helpful to everyone who's has a lot of diverse interests, I would say. And I will say also that our first intern, Harley Price, was a really great help in getting this going. And she did a lot of the initial groundwork in terms of trying to find out what were people interested in. What do we often get questions about when people are running a horse farm and they need some help, and maybe they'll call their extension office. And she did a lot of that groundwork. And so she was an intern. She ended up doing her honors thesis with us. And then we've also had several MPS projects since then. So a lot of students have done a lot of work in this project, and we're also looking to eventually involve youth as well. And so we're hoping to get a broad swath of people involved, working on their own farms, helping with the program, collaborating for ideas. So we're hoping to involve as many people as are interested. 4-H youth certainly, but really anyone who's interested in the program. And then shortly after Harley kind of did some of the initial groundwork, we started enrolling pilot farms kind of before we had a fully established program, just to see what do they want help with, have questions about, what kind of feedback can they give us on what's helpful. And so for a few years now, we've just been getting a lot of help from horse farms in the state. And they've helped us a lot with all of that feedback that we were hoping to kind of create a program that was most helpful to people. And then in terms of what our objectives were, really we're just working with horse farms to identify farm strengths and share those ideas with other people. And then also, what are some opportunities for improvement on your farm? The main goals are threefold. Enhancing equine welfare is a big one for me personally. But then also improving horse farm viability. So you'll see later when I talk about what aspects of a horse farm are we talking about. But for example, one of the categories is business management. And, because you can do all the things right and have all the perfect, the facilities and pastures are all perfect for equine welfare. But if you can't, if you have trouble maintaining the business economically, then there won't be a horse farm, right? So it's kind of a holistic approach to assessing horse farms so that we can hopefully keep them going and maintain the viability of the farms. And then kind of going along with that, more generally, just hoping to increase the sustainability of the equine sector. Not, I don't mean so much environmental sustainability, although that is a component that we look at, but more the economic sustainability, the social sustainability, just how do we maintain equine farms as a sustainable venture that someone can take on. And we're just looking to help people with that, essentially. So those are the main goals. And how we're hoping to do that / have started doing that through this program mostly is first of all, just talk to people, right? So engage with horse farm operation owners and managers. We have started to have program participant webinars, very similar to this seminar series. And then also we are establishing an annual workshop. That's where we'll kind of share what are some new kind of science-based best management practices, BMPs, and also just solicit feedback, right? Because that's, the people doing the work often have the best ideas, I would say. And then the train the trainers approach is pretty common in extension work, kind of outreach that universities do. And that's a big one that we're pursuing. So essentially, we're helping to share resources with extension personnel. Basically, what are the evidence-based best management practices for horse farms? If you know anyone who works in extension, you might know that they usually wear about 30 hats, right? And so they might be answering questions on, pasture management, pest management. Maybe they're managing the 4-H program. They have a horticulture program. They have a lot going on. And so they probably don't have time to read all of the current scientific literature for every species they might work with, right? And so we're hoping to be the in-between kind of to say, we read them for you. Here are some recommendations so that they can just share those directly with horse farmers. And then also teach them specifically how to use the Horse Farm Improvement Program resources, so that if there's a farm in their area that's interested, they can say, great, we have a program we could enroll you in, and they'll help you kind of improve in whatever areas of interest you have. And then, of course, the topic of tonight's talk, the Horse Farm Improvement Program itself consists of 3 main parts. So there's a pre-visit questionnaire, and I'll go over each of these individually, but we just ask questions like how many horses are on your farm, and then a lot of questions in some kind of subject areas. And then we schedule, once that's filled out, Qualtrics survey, then we'll just schedule an on-farm evaluation. Often we're trying to involve local extension agents. And that's just kind of going through stuff, figuring out what you're looking for help with, what kind of cool ideas do you have we might share with others. And then the last step is based on all of the answers to the questions and stuff we looked at on the farm, what's some feedback we kind of share all together in a forum for convenience. And essentially based on what we talked about and all your kind of answers to our questions and stuff, we have resources for you that are based on those findings and questions. So essentially what we're doing is we're creating a tailored improvement program for that farm. Because of course, you can have a lot of resources that are quite general, right? And those are almost always useful as well. But instead of presenting you with every resource or recommendation ever for any farm, instead, it's more helpful if it's specific to your type of farm or the type of management system you have. So if we're providing resources on full vaccine schedules, that's not of great interest to you if you're not breeding or don't have any foals, right? So we can cut that out. If you have a track management system, then you don't need a lot of information on our rotational grazing information, right? So the idea is essentially that we're trying to provide you resources that are helpful to you specifically in your farm. And that's the general idea. So we've started with a lot of this. We're in the beginning stages of a lot of it. One of the first forays into the engaging with horse farm owners and managers was we had the first annual, I called it that to pressure myself to do it again, or ourselves, I should say. That was this past January to a small audience. It was mostly just people who had already enrolled in the program and then also extension educators. But the idea is essentially that this was like a little intro to hopefully we'll have much bigger symposia in the future. And so that's my reminder to stay tuned for 2026. We're going to have a much broader Cornell Horse Symposium next year, now that we've kind of established what we want to do. And we're hoping to invite all of the people enrolled in Horse Farm Improvement Program and then a lot of other folks as well. So that'll be a cool place to share ideas with each other and just hear about some new research that's might be relevant to horse management. This little version we had was quite fun, I thought. And then in terms of train the trainers, we're starting that. So we only just a few months ago kind of rolled the program out to our extension educators in the state. So Cornell Cooperative Extension is kind of like the outreach arm of the university. And the idea is that every county in the state has their own extension office, and they all have experts and specialists in their offices in various subjects, right? Like I said, they often have quite a few roles. And so a few months ago, we have an in-service, an agriculture in-service every year in Ithaca, where Cornell is, to basically share new ideas, new research, train them in resources like the Horse Farm Improvement Program. And so we started that a few months ago, and we're going to do so again next year. And in general, we're reaching out to a lot of counties to get their input, and then also kind of help them if any farms in their area are interested in using the Horse Farm Improvement Program. So we are currently enrolling farms in New York State. So those of you who are interested, I'll have a lot of information at the end about how to reach out. And then also, if you're not in New York State and you're like, oh, why did I come tonight? I'll also have some information for you about how you could also potentially benefit from these resources, and share some information with you at the end about that too. So in general, let's say you're interested and you say, okay, I have a horse farm. What would I be doing exactly? The process is pretty straightforward. Like I said, there are three main components. The first one is a pre-farm visit questionnaire. So that's just on your computer or on your phone, and that's a Qualtrics survey, meaning you just answer a bunch of questions. Like I said, it's about what's your farm like? How many acres do you have? What are a lot of the practices? What kind of feeding? What kind of pastures, right? Just so we get a sense for partially what practices you're using, but then also just to help us plan for the on-farm portion, right? And then once we get the kind of questions back from that questionnaire, then we schedule a farm visit. So that's the second part is we schedule a time to go to your farm. And the idea is generally that we, there's always an issue, right, with if any of you have either run or participated in any kind of evaluation or just any kind of program where you're looking to improve anything, I suppose. The hard part is always you want to ask everything, right, and touch on every possible subject. But you can't because then we would be on the farm with you for 10 hours and nobody has time for that, right? So we kind of scaled it back to a set of core questions, and then we only ask extra questions in areas where people say they're interested or need help or have questions. And so the on-farm evaluation, the target is to have it less than 2 hours, ideally an hour. So we really don't want to take up people's time too much, especially if you're farming. You generally don't have any extra time. And so once we have the questionnaire and then the on-farm evaluation, then we take all of that information together with kind of what you said you're looking for in terms of resources. And we just give you all of the information, like I said, kind of in a tailored package. And that's mostly just a basis for us to have a discussion for, you know, what are some of our main recommendations, but then also what did we find that you were doing quite well and or we might like to share with other people these ideas. And then also kind of we can go based off of that. Would you like to schedule a follow-up visit? If so, you know, it could be 3 months out, 6 months out, 12, 18, whatever works for you. And just say, okay, thanks for helping me create a biosecurity plan. Can you talk to me again in 6 months and like help me a little more with this or whatever works for you. So this is very, very specific to the farm, essentially, I would say. So that's the process. That's the whole thing. And in theory, this could keep going on for as long as you're interested in participating. So let's say it's been a couple years and you've changed a bunch of stuff and you kind of have some more questions about something or want to decide how to invest maybe some grant money. Should I put it towards my fencing? Should I, you know, you're trying to decide where to make changes or something. We could always just start from the beginning or just schedule another farm eval or just based on the feedback farm, talk to you again and go through some of those things. So I'd say a lot of the focus, in addition to the actual program and resources and everything, is also just having connections to your local extension people, to me and the collaborators I work with who create the program, and essentially just knowing that you have someone to ask for help if you have a question, right? And I think one of the hardest parts, in my opinion, as someone who doesn't run like a boarding facility or anything, just from the outside looking in, one of the hardest parts about running an equine operation is that there aren't a lot of resources for people, right? So if you think about especially dairy, especially in New York State, there are a lot of resources for farmers who just want to ask questions about biosecurity or succession planning or something, right? So if you have an equine vet in your area, they're often a great resource, but maybe there aren't a lot of other equine farms in your area and you feel like you're, Googling stuff and you're not sure who to ask, and is this really best or is this an outdated recommendation? And so a lot of the idea of the program is just to have connections with people, other farm owners, and then also extension folks who can hopefully help you feel a little less, alone and overwhelmed is the idea in general. So, the program has 9 evaluation areas, and I have a little asterisk here to remind me to say we initially came up with these back in 2019 when Harley was working on her project by surveying and then interviewing a bunch of New York State horse farm operators, and then also some specialists like some nutritionists in the state and um, people with other equine businesses to just see what are areas that you tend to want guidance in, or you feel like you get conflicting advice about, stuff like that. And so the main original evaluation areas were these 8, and then we actually decided to, you'll see why later, separate nutrient management out into just nutrition, and then we added a separate pasture management category to create 9 total evaluation areas. So the horse health and biosecurity is very in line with a lot of the goals of NISHAP program, the Horse Health Assurance Program, from the early 2000s. But then we've also added a lot of kind of farm-based stuff like the facilities, manure management, and where is it? Human safety is a whole category. And then also the broader picture stuff like business management and environmental sustainability. And then a lot of questions also about nutrition, feeding horses, and then also we separated out pasture management, and it's a very common interest area, I would say. So those are the focus areas of the program. And the way it works is we send out this pre-visit questionnaire once someone says, okay, I'm interested, how do I get involved? We'll send a link to the questionnaire. And like I said, you can take it on your computer, you can take it on a phone, although that would take a little longer probably. And the idea is initially there are some demographic questions like, where are you? How can we contact you? What kind of farm do you have? But then also we're asking questions in each of those evaluation areas. The idea here is that we ask questions, some core questions in all of these evaluation areas. So even if you don't have any particular interest in, let's say, I don't know, environmental sustainability for your farm, we have just a couple core questions there. Same with human safety. For all of these, there are a handful of core questions we'll ask everyone. But we'll ask additional questions for any special interest area that you have. And so that's where you'll indicate this is on the pre-visit questionnaire. You can say, okay, really, I'm contacting you because a farm nearby had a strangles outbreak and I'm really interested in, beefing up my biosecurity plan. So that's my special interest area. Or you're welcome to click all of them. Some people do that. But this is essentially partially to save you time. If you're saying, I'm not looking for business management advice, I want farm management, stuff, then that you can kind of tell us what you're interested in, and this will direct which questions you're asked. So you won't be asked irrelevant questions. Like if you're not doing breeding, we won't ask any of those questions. And then if you're not interested in all of these evaluation areas, then we'll only ask the core questions in those other areas. So the idea is that it, again, is targeted to what you're looking for in terms of like, what kind of questions do you have? What are you looking for resources on? And I had a student last year, Isabel Stanley, who did some great work on the program. So these are the 9 evaluation areas again. And when last summer she had, no, I'm sorry, it was 2 summers ago, she had 7 pilot farms she was working with that summer. And she looked at a bunch of data regarding the pilot farms that were helping us develop the program. And one of the areas we thought was kind of interesting was to see, of all of these 9 evaluation areas, what were the number of farms that indicated special interest in that area? And every single one of them, this is a small sample, obviously, but every single one of them that we worked with that summer said they wanted help with pasture management. And I'd say that's pretty representative of all of the pilot farms and now enrolled farms that we're working with. It's just hard, right? Managing pasture is, people have whole degrees in that, right? And it's, as someone who currently has a backhoe out my window right now, digging a trench for drainage, it's it's really challenging, right? So we get a lot of questions about pasture management. In second place, at least in this set of farms, was horse health, and then also a bunch of facilities questions. Um, Least popular, not super surprising, was stuff like manure management, human safety, biosecurity. Although a lot of people ended up selecting most or all of them, which I thought was cool. So that was just a little finding she had, and it's, I'd say, roughly representative of the interests we get in general and the kinds of questions that extension agents get asked. Stuff like identifying poisonous plants, do I need to test my soil, stuff like that. Really common questions that we're hoping to help you answer with these programs. So the pre-visit questionnaire, it's a mix of like yes, no, some multiple choice, and then some of them are open-ended, kind of like what cleaning products do you use after traveling to a show or something like that, and then we can provide resources based on your answer, stuff like that. And then we also have, like I said, you can request more in-depth questions and eval and kind of like on-farm evaluation in certain areas. Like let's say you're looking to build a new facility or you're making a new pasture or whatever it is, and you want a little more focus in a certain area. That's what we're hoping to help you with. And then the requested areas, they're kind of considered like special interest questions. So for example, we might say, like I said, if you travel a lot with your horse and are coming back from shows, let's say, and you've said that in our kind of demographic questions, then we might ask, what method do you use to clean and disinfect objects that have been in contact with sick horses? And then if you want help with that, we have resources. So, and that'll kind of cue us to give you those resources if you're someone who travels a lot with your horse, for example. So again, if you say, no, I don't go anywhere with my horse, it's just me and my 3 horses on 50 acres, then we don't need to ask you this, right? It's not relevant to you. So that's how we've tried to target it as closely as we can to what you're hoping to learn. And then for the on-farm visit, there's a form. So you could do a self-evaluation if you wanted, or if you're working with an extension agent, they'll have a form with them. And so that's kind of, here's just like a little excerpt from the manure management section. So you're just looking at the storage area, the pile. If you're composting and you said yes to some of those questions, there might be questions about evaluating the composting method, helping you with any questions with that. And then there are also some kind of optional special interest area questions for the on-farm part. So for example, like evaluating air quality, if you said that was something you're either interested in or wanting to learn more about. A big thing is just taking reference photos. That helps people a lot when they're making up the feedback forms. So areas for room with improvement, partially just so we don't forget, right? But then also, I quickly learned that actually a lot of people have a unique way of doing stuff or came up with some idea that's really great. Like I can't tell you the number of times I got my phone out to take a picture of just like a great idea someone had. And so I need that and I want to share it with other people later on. And then equipment that either whoever's evaluating the farm might bring as a tape measure. So for example, like the height of fences, stuff like that. Your phone to take photos, that ends up being super useful. And then totally optional stuff, not required, but if let's say you're interested in air quality, for example, ammonia test strips are actually quite cheap. And so we can get those to extension agents often. And that can just tell you, you're managing ammonia well in your stalls or any concern areas you have. There's also something called a powder puff test that can help you evaluate airflow. So that's kind of the idea, that's helping you visualize airflow, which of course you can't usually measure visually. And the idea is that you can imagine ammonia, bacteria, microbes in the air, as kind of having a similar movement. And so the idea is that you want pretty good ventilation, right? And so again, if that's an interest area of yours, then that might be something we strive to bring to the evaluation. But again, if that's not kind of what you're interested in getting help on, then those are kind of more optional examples. In terms of our recommendations, we went through a lot of iterations on this, and I think this is the best way to do it in our experience so far. And I think to explain it, I'll just give an example. So here's a question from the pasture management section. It says, when the dry lot or sacrifice area is utilized, do you have a system in place to manage mud and manure? This is, I should be clear if the person said they have a dry lot or sacrifice area. So first I want to point out we have a source. So we have some recommendation associated with this question, right? And for every recommendation we also have a source. So first of all, so you know, we're not making it up, hopefully. Hopefully that's obvious. But and then also though, if you're really interested in this and want to learn more, you can look at the source itself if that's of particular interest to you. And so they'll have more information often. And I'll show some examples soon. And then what we do is we have a kind of a blue, green, red. So we have we picked blue because it's like in the US anyways, it's first place ribbon, right? So this is more like, you're like, what can I do if I just want to do the best possible thing? It's like the top tier recommendation if I'm really looking to go up to the next level. That's the ideal situation. Green, though, is what our baseline recommendation is, right? So in this example, if you have a dry lot or a sacrifice area, you clean it regularly of manure when it's being used. So that's our baseline recommendation. And then a changes suggested is more just, you have some kind of dry lot, but you're not managing mud or manure there. And so again, this is exclusively for your benefit, right? So there's, of course, nothing where there's no consequence really, right? It's just something that we'll notice and we'll say, oh, it looks like maybe you could benefit from some mud management. Do you want resources on that? But in general, this is more just to give you a sense for where could I improve versus where am I doing fine and I don't need to kind of put any more resources into that. And I think it's helpful often to have some outside perspectives in terms of like, no, you're managing all this okay. I think you can just focus on this because all this stuff you're meeting all of the recommendations pretty well. And so I think that can help quite a bit. So to illustrate how the program is used on a farm, I thought I'd go through a few case studies. So some pilot farms who have helped us develop the program. So I think I have 3 farms anonymized, so Farm A will be the first one. But excuse me, briefly, it's a boarding facility and they have 5 employees, just to give you a sense of the size kind of. And during the on-farm visit, what I'll do is I'll show you the associated question and then recommendation we have. So for example, are fixtures to hang buckets smooth, free of gaps, and fastened securely to the wall? So during the on-farm visit, we're hoping that the extension agent, or if you're doing it yourself, you'll take a look at these things. First of all, just because it's always nice to have another set of eyes helping you look for these things, right? And so the recommendation, I should say, not all of them have a blue or a red. Sometimes it's just the baseline. What are we recommending and the source for that? So in this case, it should be smooth connections, right? So on this farm, we found that they were latching their feed buckets to the wall with clips like this. And In general, I would say the smoother the better. And so this is better than some options for sure. We've all, had a rough time attaching buckets to walls sometimes, right? But in general, there are two ways you could improve this. You could flip it around so that this exposed little opening is further away from the horse's face when their head's down there. Or even better, you can cover this up. Either you could use, I think vet wrap is a pretty common option so that this is a kind of a smooth connection, or just have another kind of clip, either one, right? And the reason for that, I decided not to include a graphic picture, but as a vet, I feel obligated to remind people that horses will catch their eyelids on just about anything, right? And so if there's anything not completely smooth, they might catch their eyelid on it, and unfortunately, eyelid lacerations are not only fun to, not a good time to find, but also treating them can be quite challenging, right? So just eliminating anything they might catch their eyelid on, or anything else for that matter, their nose or something, is always good. And so another question, are doorways and aisles kept free of sharp projections? And so the recommendation is that you do that. Again, just a baseline recommendation there. For this picture, I don't think anyone could argue these are sharp, right? But they are slightly sticking out. So this stall opening has some eye hooks so that you can put a guard across the door, which I think is pretty common. And although rare, horses sometimes, something can always startle them, right? And they'll kind of go sideways a little bit as they're walking into the stall, and they can catch their hips most commonly, really any part of their body, but mostly their hips. And unfortunately, their pelvis can catch on that pretty hard and cause some damage. And so is this really dangerous? No. But it's just the kind of thing that I think it's helpful to think about, right? And if you're like, oh, we were gonna pull those down anyways, I guess we can do that. Or you could cover them up a little, or you could just say, yeah, we know we're fine with that. And that's great. So it's kind of just like looking around, the questions guide you in terms of like, what should I be looking for? And then if you're not sure what the goal is or what the recommendation would be, then it'll share that at the same time. Here's another example. So we have a question about agricultural fans. So the fans in horse farms should be rated for agricultural use. So for example, a common standard they have to meet is that the motors are enclosed so that you can't get like dust and debris inside the motors, which could then start a fire, which of course we're all petrified of in a horse farm, right? And so in general, if you have any kind of fan in a horse barn, it should be rated for agricultural use. So just like regular box fans aren't. And so here's a picture. I actually believe this one was rated for agricultural use, so that's good. Another question we had was, are light fixtures placed along the front or side of walls and at least 8 feet high? This was well over 8 feet high, but you'll notice it was in the middle, which is pretty common, I would say. And I'm going to be honest, I didn't know this before I did a lot of this extension work, but it turns out having lights at the front of the stall is better. If anyone who's ever had to do night check in a barn might already know why that's the case, right? And it's because if it's in the center, if the horse is in front of the light, then they're backlit, right? And you can't really see the side closest to you very well. You'd be surprised. They can be, for example, have quite a bit of blood on them and you can't notice if they're backlit. And then also just, being able to see them in general. It doesn't have to be for blood, right? Is this a huge deal that I would suggest rewiring the stall for? Definitely not, right? But maybe if you're building a new facility, you could say, oh, okay, yeah, we can put them in the front, right? So I'd say these are more just things to consider, right? And if you're maybe looking for help in remodeling or building a new facility, these are also things we could provide you resources with, just things to think about, right? And then we also, like I said, I love taking pictures of just good ideas people have, right? So one question that's more special interest for facilities question is, for all the horse specific, like this is Fluffy's equipment, is it clearly identified? And so that's a biosecurity thing sometimes, so just so that stuff isn't shared between, especially during some kind of outbreak, right? Or after return from travel. And this farm has a great system. They have a little stall side box. I mean, they're not too big. They're not projecting way into the aisleway, but they're identified this individual horse's stuff in there. And then also little care cards that tell anyone, doing chores or whatever, before turnout, apply the fly spray in here on this horse. And so then it's very clear for anyone taking care of the horses, whose is what is whose, sorry, and then also what am I doing with this horse, for example, and what do they need? So that's a cool solution, I thought. And then similarly in that vein, this farm also had a feed cart with individual containers that were labeled and then said what should be in them, when to feed them, all of that. And so I also liked this little trolley that kind of reminded me of like the train to Hogwarts, which I thought was adorable. This farm also had some great, in this case, it was a new boarder intake checklist, but they also had some other kind of management plans in place to kind of keep track of all this kind of stuff. So 2 associated questions to do with this approach are all horses up to date on their core vaccines with documentation? So as a barn manager, that helps you a lot, right? To just know, yep, they all got XYZ vaccines on these dates. And then you don't have to go chasing people down to ask them. And another related question, do all new horses or horses that leave the premises have a current negative Coggins or EIA test? And then we have recommended and changes suggested recommendations there too. And you can see that's one of the items on their new boarder intake checklist. So of course, that's a pretty abbreviated version, right, of the questions we ask and then some of the pictures we took. But that gives you a sense for, at least for the more visual questions, right? What kind of stuff we're looking at. Farm B was another pilot farm that helped us out. So this is a boarding and training facility, little bit smaller. They have a 1 part-time employee. Excuse me. So here we have our old faithful question again about sharp projections. And actually, this is a pretty common design, I would say. So a sliding stall door, instead of having a track at the bottom, it has this little metal tab that sticks out that kind of slots into the receiving bar at the other end, right? So that the horse can't kick the panel out, which is quite dangerous, right? So this is one approach to securing it, which is good in that sense. You definitely don't want the stall to be able to move out, sorry, the stall door. But this can present a concern. It's not a common source of injuries, but it's just something to know about maybe. And so if the person's worried, maybe they have an older horse who's a little unstable or a neurological patient or a foal in that stall, then they could consider maybe covering it or something. But in general, we're just there, another set of eyes, sharing some ideas, noticing stuff. And sometimes people say, oh, no, I'm fine with that. And that's fine too, right? Another question we have is about the facilities question about kind of gutters, roof runoff. And in general, the idea is to divert rainwater from high traffic areas. And again, as I say, I personally am currently looking at a backhoe in my yard. It's just really hard to manage water flow, and it's especially hard on a working farm where you have people walking in and out, mud everywhere this time of year especially. And so, for example, you can look at where are the gutters, where is the water being directed, do people or horses ever have to walk across there, are the gutters working? We can kind of help you check all that stuff. So in general, water management, which of course is related to mud management, is a really challenging issue for, I would say, almost every horse farm, right? Really any landowner, I guess. And so that's a common area that we get a lot of questions with. And we have some experts among our collaborators who are really good with pasture management, landscape design, considering where to put extra drainage if it's needed. So resources like that, I think I've found are quite helpful to people. On this farm as well. So one of the questions on the on-farm visit part is inspect the grain storage system and area. And then what the recommendations are, they should be rodent-proof ideally, weatherproof, and then also this is important, especially for horses, right? Inaccessible to horses and livestock. And so at this farm, they had a sign on the grain room door saying, please keep this shut. And all of my students who take equine, my equine class with me know why that's so important. And if you manage a horse farm, you probably do too, is that if a horse happens to get out and is able to access the grain, they can eat way too much and colic and get really sick, right? So having a sign is a pretty good way to remind people, please don't leave this door open, just latch it shut. And then horses, if one does get out, can't access it. So that's, I'd say, best case, is just reminding everyone to make sure it's closed. And of course, just having a door that you can close in the first place is another good first step. Another question, during the cold season, how are water sources managed to prevent freezing? And this farm has frost-free hydrants by the pastures. And so especially in upstate New York and in plenty of other states as well, this is a huge help, right? And so having those in a lot of regions of the country makes your life a lot easier. And I'd say a lot of farmers who have been managing farms in cold climates for long enough say that they're well worth the investment. So saving up for those, I think, is often a popular goal, I would say. This farm also had a something related to, this is something that's unfortunately often overlooked, I would say, although unfortunately, COVID actually, I would say, spurred a lot of people to think of this more, which I suppose is a silver lining. But this question, do you have a contingency plan for essential horse care if you experience illness, injury, or some kind of other emergency, and maybe outside people need to help? Even if it's a boarder or an old employee or something who's familiar with the farm, if they don't know what's going on right now, then it can be hard for them to take care of the facility, right? The horses in the facility. So this is one way of getting around that, and a really good idea to have is having some kind of checklist for what do you need to do. And of course, this is more the standard, this is what you do every day. Uh, Not all of these things are maybe on an emergency basis, right? But this is just kind of for consistency in people who are doing chores, right? But then also related to this question, maybe you suddenly are injured or something and you can't be there. If someone came to the farm, they could refer to this and then kind of know what to do. And that helps a lot. And I think, again, since COVID, I think more farms have plans like this or kind of make up lists like this, which is really helpful. Some of the cool examples I've seen are people will have photos of the horses and then which pastures they go in and which stalls they go in, and they'll have permanent IDs on the horses. And so that's, you're taken to the hospital, someone shows up to your farm and is like, what do I do? I don't know where to any of these horses go or who they are or who their owners are. And so the stalls with the contact information, a lot of good practices that people implement that are a great idea, and that we can provide templates for example, if that's something that you're interested in. Okay, so last farm, Farm C, boarding facility, also smaller, so only one part-time employee. This, they have a big pasture that has a waterer in it, this kind of automatic waterer, more common in like kind of cattle operations, right? But it turns out works really well for this farm. It's nice because you're not refilling it yourself, right? It's automatic as in the name. And then also they learned quite quickly this is the little thermal cap. All of the horses learn more or less right away that they just move it down a little with their nose. And so it's working really well for them. Some of the questions we have related to watering, kind of our shared outdoor water sources cleaned regularly. We have some recommendations on that, when to do it, what kind of stuff to use. Are they checked daily to ensure they're free of manure and algae and also have fresh water? I think we're all pretty familiar with that and why, but there are some good resources kind of on like, okay, what if I do find a lot of algae? How do I manage that? So that can be helpful for some areas. And then also some other more detailed questions, kind of like this is an on-farm question. Go look at the water point, water source. How is it functioning? Is it look like it's being cleaned often enough? And then also, is water offered to the group or individually? A big thing we ask is, can an individual horse block access? And this is a common, I guess I wouldn't say common, this is a concern that can arise if you have a lot of horses in one paddock or pasture and only one water source. And there's, especially if it's the hierarchy is still being established, right? Water can be seen as a resource, right? And so some horses might prevent access. And so just making sure the water is accessible to all of them can be really important. So those are some related questions there. This question that was our example, right, from the dry lot sacrifice area. This farm has these really lovely mud management grids, and they're working really well there. They are pretty expensive, but if for farms that can swing that, most people have are really pleased with them. And so some resources on what kind of considerations to make if you're trying to decide on those, but then also on how to create a high traffic pad yourself without these grids, if that's something else that interests you. So in general, just these are all questions that are kind of tailored to your interests and how you're managing your farm. And then last example here on the this farm, they have a really large good sign for as a warning to visitors. So that's one of the recommendations we have in terms of the Safety and Agricultural Tourism Act. And so this is kind of like a legal business management consideration, is having these kind of sign up. So they had that, which was great. So those are some example farms, some pilot farms that helped us with the program. And I thought I'd mention some of the most common inquiries we get and that we have resources to help people with. A big one was, can you help me develop a biosecurity plan for my farm? We have a bunch of biosecurity resources. Another big one was, should I test my pastures? For what? How often? Where do I submit these things? Who can help me with that? And then also another one that I hadn't really thought of much before starting the program was, are there any subsidies or grants I can apply for? Who can help me with stuff? So those are, I would say, some of the most common questions we've gotten so far. And this biosecurity plan question, because it's so common, I thought I would just mention now that the EDCC, Equine Disease Communication Center, is a great website, and it's run in part by the AAP, the American Association of Equine Practitioners. So that's vets who practice on horses. They have a ton of great resources, both on prevention of disease and then also responding to disease outbreaks and stuff. So they have all the current information on any reportable diseases happening in your area on a county level. And so this is a great resources that we often refer people to. And then I also thought I'd mention, kind of related to that, I'd say one of the hardest things for people to do, even if they would like to or know that it is a recommendation, is just to have a temporary area to isolate a horse or quarantine a horse, either if they're new or if there is an outbreak on your farm. It's just hard to have that set up, right? Because in a normal function status, you're not isolating horses, right? So that's a really hard one that a lot of people struggle with. But we do have a bunch of resources on biosecurity and just some ideas. Here's a photo from the horse. They and a bunch of other sources we have some recommendations on, like, how do I do this temporarily if my barn isn't generally set up for quarantine and isolation and stuff. So those are some examples. I just wanted to, this is the template that we have for the feedback form. So generally, we're just summarizing some findings in each evaluation area, always include positive findings. And then just for each evaluation area, remember there are 9, we'll just pick like 1 to 3 top recommendations. So it would be too overwhelming to share every resource ever that we've collated, right? So instead, we're just saying, after talking with you based on your interests, what you had questions about, what's going on your farm, we're just having these recommendations with the resources for you to learn more in the each evaluation area. And so we have a recommendations and sources master list, and we just pull from that to make these few recommendations kind of based on what you were asking. To get involved, you can reach out to us. And so this is, of course, a New York-based program. Any size farm is eligible. Any farm type, horse breeds, uses. If it's an equid, then we're happy to work with you. And what you'll do is you'll reach out to your local Cornell Cooperative Extension office. So the idea is we'll work with your local extension agent to enroll your farm. This is a QR code, but we'll send out the information in the follow-up email as well. To find, if you're not sure where your office is or how to contact them, that's there. And excuse me. There's the link as well. We also have resources if you want to share this information. Maybe you work in extension or you want to share this with your farm manager or something. We have, this is a kind of printout for people to share if they want. We also have a one-pager that has a little more information for people who want to learn more about it. And then I expect not every single one of you is from New York State, and so I figured I'd share what to do in that case. So if you're outside of New York, we're happy to share resources with your local extension office too. So finding out who that is, and then having them reach out to us. This isn't proprietary in any way. We're happy to share with anyone who's interested, right? And then to that end, we're also eventually going to have the recommendations master list in a kind of palatable, searchable format with all of the sources and everything on our website. And this is a QR code to that website. It doesn't currently have the whole master list. We have to make it in an accessible format. So that's going to take us a little while, but that's the goal eventually. And so in theory, if you don't have an extension office near you, or there's just no one in your area who's able to help, in theory, you could use this resource and all of these, this master list of recommendations to kind of do a self-evaluation and just get some kind of current best management practice as advice from there. And you can, like I just said, you can perform a self-analysis. I did want to just quickly mention and have up here some of the collaborators on this program who've helped develop it and have done some testing as well. So a big thank you to all of them. And they're continuing mostly to help enroll farms or kind of make recommendations for the program. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. And I look forward to working with some of you, hopefully.
Thanks so much, Lindsay. That was a wonderful talk and really informative about this important program. We do have a couple questions. Looks like we have a couple minutes to get through them here. So first one is the horse farm improvement program a good place to start for a new equine farm that hasn't gotten started? So on education and setting up a full operational blueprint so that horses and facilities can get off on the right foot. Would this be a service that works for a farm that isn't yet in operation?
Definitely. And I'd say the only point that might feel like a little frustrating on that end is the question will be asking you a lot of like, what do you do? What's your current practice? And so you can maybe just put there, you know, you're not doing any of that, or what you're hoping to do or planning to do, and then we can answer based on that. But yes, absolutely. A lot of the things we might note on a farm visit, like the light example, are actually much easier to fix or just have right in the first place if you've thought about all this stuff before doing any of the work. So yes, absolutely happy to help in that case.
Awesome. This should be a quick one. Do you do any video on farm evaluations, or do you always need to be physically present?
Oh, now I see what you that means. Um, I thought you meant like, do we take videos, which we don't while we're there. We haven't done that. I'd say probably the best way to go in that direction, excuse me, is reaching out to our local extension office and then um, kind of seeing what areas you have questions in. We don't always have to be in person to evaluate that, and helping you facilitate like kind of a self-analysis and then asking us questions based on what kind of questions you run into is probably our current approach to that. If the program expands, then perhaps we could offer something like that in the future.
Excellent. Do you work with university programs outside of Cornell? Have you done any farm evaluations on university farms?
We have, and we've had kindly enough a couple universities in New York help as pilot farms, and so that was helpful to kind of see some different types of farms. We're happy to work anyone who has any kind of equids, very happy to work with, definitely.
Excellent. Do you happen to know if there are any similar programs in Canada?
Canada is kind of cool in the sense that they have an equine code of practice, which is to say, it's essentially a list of basic kind of best management practices. And so I'd say it's more akin to like a self-evaluation, I guess, but they've thought pretty thoroughly about it, and as a country have come up with a bunch of evaluation questions and then recommendations. So they have the Equine Code of Practice, and I think that's a really good place to start. And then in terms of helping out, they also have extension folks in universities there too.
Excellent. We're a little bit past 7, so I think we
Yes.
will wrap up with that. Thank you all very much for attending. We hope to see some of you in person next month at the Cornell Equine Park. Look out for that link for registration again when the video reminder comes out for this session next week. Thanks so much for attending.